Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today we're talking about my January audiobook wrap-up. If you're new to this channel, welcome, hello, glad to have you. I do two wrap-ups every month. I do a physical reading wrap-up and an audiobook wrap-up. My physical reading wrap-up was up yesterday. I'll post the link for it down below in the description. But these are only the books that I listened to on audiobook this month. And boy oh boy did I have a month. So while I had a super slow January reading month, I had an excellent audiobook month. I was just more tired and sluggish this month, coming off of being sick and Christmas and having friends in town and doing too many things. So I did a lot of audiobook listening before I went to bed instead of reading before I went to bed. I wound up getting a lot of audiobooks in, plus I listened to a lot of really short audiobooks, which is why my number is so high. I listened to some amazing things and I'm really excited to get into them. So we're going to be talking about 12 audiobooks, even though technically I finished 2 of them in February, but I'm filming this video on February 3rd and I just wanted to talk about them while they're fresh on my brain, so I'm cheating a little bit, but that's okay. We are designating this year the Year of the Fairy because I started off listening to some fairy books. I'm officially obsessed. So first up, I started off the month listening to The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black, narrated by Lauren Fortgang. This is a fae story set in our world where the fairies are present and we know about them. And this particular town is set on like a forest edge and there is a fairy boy with antler ears in a coffin. He has been there for I think over 100 years and nobody knows why. Nobody can open it. It's where like the teenagers go and play, talk about the fairy boy, and they wonder about his mystery and they have to be careful because of the fairy. The fae can come in and kind of interact with you in your everyday life, so they have to be a little bit careful, and the fae is just very much a part of their culture. So our lead character Hazel and her brother Ben have grown up in the town of Fairfold and they have told each other fairy stories and stories they've made up about this horned boy in the glass coffin, and they would pretend that they were knights and that they would go and protect the town, and also that their horned boy was different than the other fairies who have made cruel bargains and tortured the town of Fairfold. But as they grow up, Hazel kind of sets those fairy tale dreams and knighthood desires aside because she believes that the horned boy will never wake up until one day he does. So that's all I want to give away, but oh my gosh. So this is technically, I think, set in the same universe as The Cruel Prince. I believe it's set prior to The Cruel Prince and everything that happens there. I freaking loved this book so much. It is a standalone novel other than the somewhat prequel factor, and I don't know, our narrator was awesome. She's just the type of narrator that I like, and I don't even know how to describe it. She just does her teenage voice very well, but also her male voice is good, and she can do the goblins and evil fairies and all those things really excellently. She's so good, and I just couldn't get enough of this. I listened to it before bed. I would play an app where you like color in a coloring book with your finger while I listened to it before I went to bed, and it was so like fun and relaxing and enchanting and magical, and there's just like there's magical swords and sword play, and Ben and Hazel's parents are really cute and I loved them, and I loved how the town just like accepts that there are fairies and how the magic kind of interacts with the modern world. And in this book, I don't know if you guys have watched my previous videos, but I work for a company that talks about probiotic foods that you can make at home, like kombucha and kefir and pickles and things that are really good for you and help like cleanse the body. I've been eating these foods and making them for over like 15 years, and my mom started a company and I work for her company. But anyway, in the book they actually mention kefir, which is a fermented milk product that is kind of like yogurt, but it's a little bit more specific and a little bit like it's been around a little bit longer. And they actually talk about how their like kind of hippie mom is making a kale and kefir and honey smoothie, and I don't know why, like I never see kefir, especially in pop culture. Like I see kombucha now, but not kefir, and I just loved it, and I think we're gonna make like this smoothie maybe as a recipe for the website based off this book and talk about the book and stuff, or at least take a picture. I don't know. That part just really got to me and it made me feel great. The ending to this book was so excellent. I just loved it so much. Hazel was such a fun protagonist. She was like feisty and adventurous and smart and witty, and I loved it. And I loved our side characters in here. I loved the love interest. I loved her brother. I loved the horn boy. It was so cute. It had just started me off like on such a good like fairy high. And I also just love Holly Black's writing style. Every time I read or listen to something from her, it's just like confirmed more and more how much I love her. Next up, I listened to The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King, both narrated by Caitlin Kelly on audiobook. So continuing on with my fairy journey. For those of you that don't know, The Cruel Prince is a fairy story kind of similar to The Darkest Part of the Forest, where the fairies are kind of known in the modern world, and our lead character Jude and I think her sisters are basically kidnapped by a fairy after her parents were murdered and taken into the fairy realm to live and grow up, and they have a horrible time because of being immortal. They get brutally picked on. There is trigger warnings for bullying in here. Definitely. It's fairly brutal, fairly typical for a fae story or a fairy story, and it's basically about them living in fairyland, and there's a really cruel prince. And there's politics and magic and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. I wound up giving The Cruel Prince 4 stars and The Wicked King 4 stars, but both like kind of just barely. I loved The Darkest Part of the Forest more than these two overall, but because I'm like in such a fairy mood, because I listened to them in a row, I am really invested in this world and I'm really excited to continue on. But they were definitely more slower paced than I was anticipating, and there's a lot more like politics and world building, which I like. There was just like one missing element that didn't push them to like the complete obsession level for me, and maybe it was just being overhyped, but they were like 4-star books. Oh my gosh. Sorry guys, it's like raining really, really hard. If you can hear that, I apologize. But they were definitely solid 4-star books for me. The audiobooks were really, really great. I really enjoyed listening to them. They were really especially good to listen to like before bed. The narrator wasn't quite as good as Lauren Fortgang, but I enjoyed her a lot. I had so much fun in this like fae world, and I was really excited that the Cruel Prince is actually a cruel prince. Oh my gosh. Lightning and the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. That's all I think now when it rains here. It's just been raining so much. I apologize. I really liked that he was an actual cruel prince, and I liked that there were some elements I couldn't figure out. I liked that the end of The Cruel Prince was a little bit of a surprise, same as The Wicked King. I think these covers are beautiful. Not that that matters for the story, but it kind of does. It helps a little bit. And in The Wicked King, I was especially excited because we got some mermaidy-esque fairy folklore in here as well. And I'm obsessed with mermaids, and there aren't enough of them in like good YA books, so I was really excited when we got some of that in there. And I did wind up telling my husband a lot about these books too. That's kind of how I can tell how into a story I am, is how much I need to tell my husband about it, even though he really doesn't care. But I did really like them. I'm excited to carry on with the rest of the series when it comes out next year, sadly. And I am glad that I'm caught up on this particular fandom, because Wicked King was a 2019 new release and checked it off my list. I also want to talk about The Lost Sisters by Holly Black, narrated by Caitlin Kelly as well. This was the novella set in the Cruel Prince universe. This is in between Cruel Prince and The Wicked King. This is a true novella, so if you are not at a 4-star level with The Cruel Prince, then skip this one, because this is what a novella should be. You get a back history on the world and some of the characters, particularly Jude's sister in The Cruel Prince, and it kind of explains why things happened the way that they did. I loved it. I love backstories on side characters of books that I really enjoy. Some people thought that it was pointless, but that's kind of the point of a novella. If it is crucial enough to the story that you have to read it to continue on, then it shouldn't be a novella. It should just be in the book. That's my personal opinion. This was a true novella with some thoughts and situations from a different character's perspective, and the way it was written was really beautiful. It's like an 1.5 hour long audiobook. I really loved it. I thought it added a lot for me personally, just enjoying the world, and I was really glad that I wound up listening to it. All right, next up, Jeff and I finally finished Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. narrated by Greg Tremblay. And holy freaking cow! I can't believe it took us this long to finish. We started it in like October and we are listening to it together, like in the same room. And so it just took us a long time to listen to it because it's like almost 11 hours to like when we're in the car together. We wanted to listen to it for big chunks at a time. And we finally finished it. And I wish I would have finished it in 2018 because it would have been on my favorites list because I'm completely obsessed with Scythe. Holy crap, I love Scythe so much. If you're not familiar with this world, Scythe is set in the future where we have figured out how to not die, basically. We don't get killed when we get hit by buses or we fall off buildings or of old age. We figured out how to reset our bodies back to a younger age. Once we hit a certain point, people are having multiple families because of this. And because of this, the population count is getting out of control. In this society, they have set up the Scythedom, which basically means they have designated people to be trained to kill people and mostly randomly to keep the population count under control. And it's supposed to be like an honorable thing. The Scythes are supposed to have compassion and great thought put into their work, and it's just something that has to happen because we don't die of natural causes or even not natural causes. And so there are these designated scythes and there's this whole like almost government type thing within the scythedom. And also there's this artificial intelligence called the Thunderhead, which oversees everything that goes on in the world except for the scythedom. That's in their own control, but he kind of keeps an eye on everything else. He can help with the weather and storms and all kinds of different things. And so we've got this really advanced utopian society. It is about two young teenagers that apprentice to be scythes, Citra and Rowan, and they're both under this like prestigious scythe known for being good at his job, and that is the minimum that I'm going to give you because it's so freaking amazing. And the world building in this one, in Scythe in general and Scythe and Thunderhead, the world building is just phenomenal. It's one of the books, both of these books, that I literally think about all the time because it brings up all these things that would happen if we were in a society where nobody ever dies that you wouldn't think about. And the fact that people don't care about their kids as much because they have multiple sets of kids because they've reset back to younger ages and got remarried or stayed married or whatever, and people have less drive and passion because they know that their life isn't going to be over in a certain amount of time. Oh, there's so many things that are tied in here. So many things with the scythedom and the world and the way that people think, and there's no disease, and it's just phenomenal. Jeff and I hope to do a book talk on both of these coming up shortly. Don't count me on that. I'm really bad about doing book talks, but this is like our new favorite series as a couple and we're completely obsessed. The ending to both of them was just like, I knew that they were going to be surprising, but I didn't understand how. It wasn't how I thought, and I'm literally dying inside. The Thunderhead ended the way that it did, and I don't have The Toll, which is the next book, in my hand, or even an announcement date for when it's going to come out. On one hand, I want Neil to take his time because I want it to be thorough and excellent, and I don't know if it's the last book in the series. But on the other hand, I need it right freaking now, and Greg Tremblay is so good at narrating these books. It does have like a slower feel to it because it's supposed to be very like thought-provoking, and it is. So go into it not expecting like this crazy action-based book, which there are these amazing action-based things, but it's very political and very thought-provoking, and the world building and the characters, and I almost cried. I think I did tear up a little bit actually in Thunderhead. 5 stars, 5 million stars. I loved it so freaking much. It's one of my new favorite series of all time. I literally cannot wait for The Toll. I'm so excited. I need to talk to more people about Thunderhead because I don't know. I haven't heard enough about it, and it's just the detail and the twists and turns, and it was brilliant in my opinion. Friggin' brilliant. It's gonna be a long video, so sorry about that. Then I decided to start my listening of the Chronicles of Narnia, which was the goal for this year. I want to reread some of my favorite books as a child, and also the Chronicles of Narnia are becoming a TV series, I think on Amazon or Netflix sometime, possibly this year. So I wanted a refresher, plus I never read 3 of the books. I started off reading them in chronological order instead of publication order, which is different than how I read them growing up. So I started off with The Magician's Nephew, which is technically the prequel to the Chronicles of Narnia, which I have never read. So this is set in Narnia and is about 2 characters that we find out that their uncle is a magician and he winds up sending them into another world. And so I'm sure you can guess what that world is. And this was excellent. This was narrated by Kenneth Branagh, sorry I don't pronounce that correctly. He was amazing. He's an actor that does a lot of Shakespearean stuff as well, and I've heard of him before, and he did such an amazing job. I had so much fun with this, and this has a little bit of fairy folklore in it, which I just didn't realize for some reason. So that was great as well for my year of the fairy mood that I'm in. It was so good. I gave it 4.5 stars. The witch in here and the 2 kids and the uncle was hilarious, and we get Narnia and we get Aslan, and I loved it. I thought it was so great. It was such a great prequel. I feel like even if you haven't read the Chronicles of Narnia and you start here, you're gonna love it. It's really great. It was like a short 4-hour audiobook. Then I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, narrated by Michael York. So this was technically book 1 when I was reading them. So this is about 4 children, and they discover a magical wardrobe that leads them into a world called Narnia. And they find a lot of things like witches and magical lions and lots of wonderful things, and I'm sure that you've heard of this because it's quite popular. I thought that this one was excellent, especially for sentimental reasons. I gave this one 5 stars just because sentimental reasons, and I think that they hold up really well even as middle grade books. For if you're not middle grade, it won't bother you at all. But it is just such an amazing story, and it's so magical and whimsical, and it's one of the first stories where, we talk about entering different worlds as far as middle grade books go, and yeah, I love it. Then I read The Horse and His Boy, narrated by Alex Jennings. This was originally book 5 in the series and winds up being book 4 in the chronological order. At least I hope that's right. That's what Overdrive said. So I also haven't read this one. This is my first time reading or listening to this one. And this one I struggled a lot more to get through. This is about a talking horse named Bree and a young orphan named Shasta, and they're in Narnia and they have their own adventures. You do get a little bit of the characters from Chronicles of Narnia in here, and maybe I was just missing them, which didn't bother me in The Magician's Nephew, but it bothered me in this one. I just didn't love it as much, or maybe I didn't like the narrator as much. I wound up giving this one 3.5 stars. It was a little tougher for me to get through. I mean, they're all 4 hours, so it's not that big of a deal. But it does have your wonderful Narnia-ness in here, and the talking animals and just the magical stuff. So I don't want to give away too much because it's technically book 3. Yeah, it was okay. Then I listened to Prince Caspian, narrated by Lynn Redgrave, which was originally book 2, but in the chronological order, it's book 4. So I'm getting all messed up now. I have read this one before, so it was a reread for me via audiobook. I did enjoy Lynn Redgrave as a female narrator, and I enjoyed her narration quite a bit. We get Lucy and Edmund and all of our characters in here, which was really nice to be back in the world with them. I gave this one 4 stars for nostalgic purposes. Again, I found it a little bit more dull than the other books, but I just remember it from childhood, and I really enjoy those 4 main characters that we get from the Chronicles of Narnia. And yeah, again, can't say much because spoilers. I will be continuing on with the Chronicles of Narnia book and reading the last 3 for February. Next up, I listened to Forever by Maggie Stiefvater, narrated by Dan Bittner, Jenna, Maggie Stiefvater, and I think Phoebe Stroll. I'm not sure who the 4th person is. I can't remember. This one is basically a full cast because it's told from 4 different characters' perspectives. This is the final book in the Shiver series, although there is a back history of one of the characters that came out after this. It's kind of like the 4th book that I haven't read yet. So if you're not familiar, the Shiver series is set in Mercy Falls, where there are wolves. And our lead character, Grace, has always been obsessed with the wolves, and she gets attacked by them when she's younger, but then comes to find out that the wolves are actually human, and it's kind of a love story / adventure story about her experience with that. So don't want to say too much more. This one I have had on my shelf for an extremely long time. I started this series over 10 years ago, and then I reread the first 2 last year, and it's just super dull. It's more of a dull series. This was my favorite book overall. I gave it 3.5 stars, don't think I'll be reading Sinner. I'm not sure. I love the covers of these so much. It's not as action-packed as I was expecting. There are a lot of details and emphasis on the love story, but not necessarily in the way that I enjoy. I don't know. It's slow and dramatic and like teenage angsty. It's teenage angsty, that's what it is. So as a whole, the series is like 3 stars, maybe less. Didn't love it. I did enjoy this one the most, but I don't know if that's because it was on audiobook, because I really like Dan Bittner, and Maggie Stiefvater did an amazing job narrating, by the way, her own book. And I can't wait to read The Raven Boys, but this overall was just like a 3-star series for me. Next up, listened to Nimona, which is a full cast production, not an audiobook, but a production, because this is a graphic novel about a villain named Blackheart, his nemesis Goldenloin, and a young girl named Nimona who wants to be Blackheart's teenage sidekick and like do evil and conquer the good guys. And this is a 5-star read for me. It was a 5-star full cast production. I was really curious to see how they were going to do graphic novel in audiobook form when the pictures are so important. They did an amazing job having read the book and then listened to it. I'm not sure how I would feel if I'd listened to it without reading it, but there are tons of sound effects. There's a bunch of different voice actors. Rebecca Solar is the narrator for Nimona. She's my favorite audiobook narrator. She narrated like the Lunar Chronicles and Caraval and so many amazing books. And it was so much fun. I literally couldn't stop smiling while reading and listening to this book. And I didn't do it at the same time. I did them back to back. I love this story so much. I'm gonna reread it every year. It's in my heart. It's one of those like warm and fuzzy books because I loved it that much. And it was just adventure-y. It kind of makes fun of fantasy tropes and a surprising ending. And I want there to be more in this universe because I adored it. And the full cast production was top-notch, and it's only 2.5 hours. So you should listen to it, even if you don't like graphic novels, because I didn't realize that I did until this book. And lastly, I listened to Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. This was a reread for me via audiobook. I've been loving doing my rereads via audiobook and seeing how I like the narrators for some of my favorite books. This was narrated by Kate Simses, and she did an okay job. I wasn't as thrilled for her voice for Juliet. It was got that younger teenagery feel to it that I really don't like, but she did an amazing job with the male narrations, which sometimes the female narrators struggle with. I really enjoyed this overall. I read it really, really fast. I did finish it here in the beginning of February, but I wanted to throw it in here so it was fresh on my brain. I'm rereading this entire series in preparation for the release of the new novella, Shadow Me, which comes out in like a couple days, and then Find Me, I believe, which is the 5th book in the dystopian series about a girl who has been locked away because her touch is lethal. Whenever she touches someone, she winds up hurting them and can even wind up killing them. She is locked away for over 365 days with no one and nothing but a notebook. So in the book, it is told in like somewhat journal entries, and she winds up crossing things out. I don't know if you guys can see that. Like she'll say something and then cross it out and put something else down. It's got a specific feel to it. The way they did that on audiobook was they used like a scratching sound, but I feel like if you hadn't read the book, you would be like, what is this noise? I don't understand what's happening. So I thought that was kind of weird, but once you get past that part, especially with the future of the books, it doesn't have as much of that in there. That was the only thing that kind of bothered me, and the fact that I wasn't as thrilled with her narration. But overall, I enjoyed it so much. I gave it 4.5 stars purely just for like emotional attachment reasons. I just love this series, and I just find it so fun. It's such a great dystopian series in my opinion, but also not just dystopian. It's got some like superhero elements to it as well. This one is definitely my least favorite of the series, but I still really, really enjoy it, like 4.5 stars. It's really interesting reading this, knowing what you know after you read the next few books, because you know things about certain characters that you didn't know before, and it was really interesting like analyzing it from that mind point. So that was really, really fun, and I'm really excited to carry on with the rest of the audiobooks, and hopefully I love them just as well. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like to listen to audiobooks, if there's any that you really enjoyed this month, because I love a good audiobook as well as a physical book. But I have great plans for February. I have a winter to be listened to video coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes on the weekends. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on The Bright Side.